Codependency is understood in many different ways. So who knows how many people own the concept, but it's this idea that everything about who I am and what I am is based on you, my person I'm in a relationship with. But we're neurobiologically wired to deeply bond with our partner. So of course there's going to be elements of our life that we try to co-value what they value. Some of their priorities are our priorities. When they're in crisis, I'm gonna be in crisis.
That's right.
Like we are not saved from that. And when I am struggling, when you're struggling, it doesn't mean that I'm a codependent. It means that I'm pair bonded to you and your disruption is going to disrupt me.
When I even just mention codependency with a client, immediately there's shame. Immediately there's this immediate sense of, oh my gosh, I failed. I've got to fix this. Instead of it looking like, okay, what do some of these patterns mean about how you feel safe in the world around you?
Marriage Health with James and Teri Kraft.
We are so excited because we are going to be talking with Kristen Snowden. What we really want to share with our listeners is that Kristen Snowden is the real deal. She knows what she's talking about. She's a trusted and safe person to really dive into some of these hard topics. So we're very excited. I know you will be too.
There's a couple therapy charge words that we have. There's boundaries, and there's these concepts of codependency. And I know when I was just getting into therapy world, those words just kind of would slough over me, and I didn't really spend that much. They weren't that impactful in my life. The now received model of codependency, I'm such a coda. We have a problem because we're codependent. It's kind of blaming and shaming. It's saying that you're the co-addict in this addict relationship, and if you'd clean up your stuff, then maybe your husband's addiction wouldn't keep going on.
Was that term ever used to make you feel shame?
I used it against myself in a lot of ways. Yes, absolutely. I shamed myself all the time. I can remember sitting in bed, crying and thinking if I would have done things differently, then maybe he wouldn't have done this to me. Like if I was better at doing XYZ, or if I would have worked harder, right? And that's that tendency, right? To want to try to fix or overcompensate. And so there was a lot of times I used that shame against myself that, I had those tendencies, and if I would have done that differently, that I would have been able to somehow negate the painful thing that was coming at me. And I think, it was really good counseling and coaching that finally, looked me in the eye and said, this was not you. This wasn't you. This wasn't you. This was someone else's choices. And no one makes someone lie. No one makes someone cheat. No one makes someone, continue in an addiction. That sort of thought process is gaslighting, and it's been weaponized against you. And I can remember just feeling like just relief, like I didn't cause my partner to do the things that he did. And that's when I learned the tool. Hey, you are responsible to him. You're not responsible for him. And that was hugely, it was incredibly healing to realize that I was responsible for me, but I'm responsible to walk next to someone. Wow. I have been for many years thinking that I was responsible for him and for me and for everyone else in my immediate circle. And it was like the huge backpack of bricks and cement and everything that was weighing me down, trying to be responsible for everyone. I was able to lay that down and go, wait, I'm responsible for me. I can do that, right? I can do that. And that's where those codependent tendencies started to get addressed one by one, and it got assimilated into a healthy me, right? And then that healthy me was able to interact with James in a way that was brand new. And some of that, he went, whoa, she's stepping out of my circle of chaos. We call it a tornado. She stepped out of my tornado. Wait a second, that means I think I'm responsible for my tornado. I'm responsible for that. I'm responsible for the debris. I need to get myself on a journey of healing. She's not gonna just carry me through that anymore. And I decided maybe I wasn't gonna be his parent anymore, right? Or his source. And at that point, we both got some traction. That's the beauty of being able to get like to the point where you can go, okay, I'm not going to be shamed by the fact that I might have codependent tendencies. But when I can actually have compassion for why those mechanisms or those adaptive strategies are there and they exist as a means of surviving or creating safety or walking through life, my story, and then I'm able to like get with somebody who can help me unpack that and find freedom there. I mean, that is healthy and wholehearted. And that is the best atmosphere to create a healthy marriage. You know, and I think that's why I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that term, the classical kind of term of codependency, is potentially had its day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when I am struggling, when you're struggling, it doesn't mean that I'm a codependent.
Yeah.
Right.
It means that I'm pair bonded to you and your disruption is going to disrupt me.
Yeah. Right.
Now, of course, if we lived with like a less codependent and a more interdependent or prodependent model, it's this idea that yes, when you are in crisis and you're in struggle, let's say you're in active addiction, my life is going to be disrupted. Our children's lives are going to be disrupted.
Yes.
Everything about my neurobiology will not be at peace because you are connected with my safety, my stability, my financial safety, our children, how often I get to see them and their situation. So of course I'm going to be disrupted, but we have to have levels of boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? Just because I am intertwined with you doesn't mean that I have this permanent enmeshment where then I need to go down the crazy train of addiction. Right? Or that I'm going to absorb the blame and shame of you having a sickness that you need to work through and you need to get recovery in.
It is absolutely not codependent to have needs and emotions, to want safety, to use your voice. None of those things are bad in a relationship. The word codependency being used and weaponized against people is absolutely an NO. No. Codependency is I'm in a situation where I'm not having safety in my relationship, and yet I'm continuing to invest, overcompensate with my energy, with my time, with my talent. Maybe my fears are in there, so it's making me fix things. It's making me sort of like be the emotional regulator. I'm not having boundaries, and I'm kind of coming behind, and I'm fixing. I'm not being treated well. All those kinds of things are like sort of the indicators that someone in a more healthy place, maybe who had different childhood experiences, would have said at this point, heck no, I need to have this boundary, or you need to take responsibility for this part of your life, and I'm gonna step out of that. But a codependent, the original sort of idea and term and understanding of codependent is that I'm there at my peril. It's hurtful, harmful, and I'm still in it. It's I'm taking responsibility for you, because if I don't, then every fear of my childhood, every fear, every abuse, every trauma, everything that I've been running from since I was a young child is going to come to pass. And it's like we forget that trauma shows up. Trauma can look like codependence. And when we don't have a skilled clinician or a skilled alongside-er, or if we don't understand trauma in the language of our recovery, what happens is then it's just like all the blame shifting goes right back onto the person who's been traumatized. And not only are you traumatized and your body's dysregulating because you're completely feeling unsafe again, and rightly so, because there might be a reason why. It's like, get your shizzle together because you shouldn't be doing this. And it's like, yeah, accept the fact that there's trauma there, right? And so we first have to deal with the trauma, and then we have to deal with the adaptive strategies, which are called sometimes codependent tendencies. But we first have to deal with the trauma. And if we don't, we go straight to the codependent tendencies and we don't deal with the trauma, a person is just re-traumatized and re-traumatized and re-traumatized because it's in their body, right? That's the body keeps the score, right? But if we don't look at the trauma, we don't look at the co-woundedness, we're never going to be able to get to in a compassionate and a successful way. We can't get to the adaptive strategies, which one of them is called codependent. The other place that sometimes codependency can also bring harm is sometimes in a therapeutic or counseling situation where, like, let's say maybe a counselor hasn't had some of the training in addiction, repetitive behavior patterns, trauma, betrayal trauma, all of the things, right, that those of us who've been trained in that can see and really navigate. We can kind of sniff out the gaslighting. When some of that is there's not training for that, then sometimes I can enter into, like, let's say a couple's environment with a counselor who doesn't have that training. And all of a sudden it's like, it's the person who's trying to overcompensate the codependent tendencies. That person can all of the energy gets shifted onto them. They need to bring their emotional state into check. They need to stop checking, if there's some kind of continued relapse. They need to get a hold of their own sense of self and regulate and not, get into, trying to regulate someone else and all those things, everything. You just need to get your act together. And that's just not fair. And it's also really damaging. So that has also contributed to that term codependency becoming such a taboo. The problem with the term codependency, it has been weaponized.
When I'm trying to help, right? So the bomb's gone off in the home, they're in full crisis mode, and they're trying to figure out, what are we working toward? What is this ever elusive thing that you're talking about called healthy relationships, Kristen? Please describe them to me.
Yes.
Because I don't know what love is. I don't know what trust is. I don't know what safety is.
Yeah.
And I would say, okay, it's all those things. We're trying to bring those back.
Yeah.
But it's this idea that you have to do a lot of your own work, because, by the way, during crisis, we lose ourselves. We forget who we are, what we need, what brings us joy, what brings us safety and stability.
Yeah.
You need to do your own personal work to start figuring that out, because your partner may never get his or her stuff together.
Yeah.
What typically happens, though, is if the person who's dealing with the repetitive behavior pattern, addiction, lying, deceit, if there's gaslighting in there, if there's just mental illness, or there's early childhood experiences that are creating maybe anger or rage cycles, if this person isn't getting help, all of these things that I was doing that were looking like codependent, and I start to do this and I start to get healthy and I'm walking side by side, sometimes that dysregulates this person to a gigantic degree. Because wait a second, you were my source. You were my source. You were the reason why I could function. You were giving me emotional regulation. You were helping me function in life. You were the one that showed up when I screwed everything up, right? You're the one who was giving me what I needed. You were my source. And this person goes, well, of course I'm walking next to you. And we in a healthy way source one another, right? In a healthy way, we're giving each other healthy attachment, and we're giving each other healthy reception of needs and wants and desires. But I'm also walking separately. And I'm also understanding what healthy individual life and boundaries look like. Because when we start to live in a way that's healthy, that's always going to be better for not only ourselves, but our coupleship as well. Because our hope and prayer is that our partner who's dealing with these repetitive behavior patterns, they're going to decide to do the same kind of work and realize that they also are responsible for all of their adaptive strategies, all those complex elements of their story they brought into our relationship. And they're also going to have to own and be responsible for how their repetitive behavior patterns, mental illness, gaslighting, deception, whatever it might be over here, is impacting the relationship. They have to own it and they have to do their work, right? So they have to learn to be interdependent as opposed to just dependent.
A healthy relationship's like a tree. So, and if let's say it's two trees and the leaves kind of meet together, but the most important part is the rooting system.
Yeah.
Right?
Good.
The deeper the roots go, the more roots there are,
Yep.
the more likely you're going to survive the storms, the floods, the drought. And so I always ask clients, what are your roots?
Yeah, that's good.
Right? Maybe spirituality is, your religion and your religious community is important to you. Those are deep roots.
Yeah.
Hang on to them, nourish them.
Yeah.
Your family. What about some values? What about some passions or interests that you have? My job, singing, music, travel. And yes, sure, your partner is you better hope that they have a root towards, but the idea is that the more rooting you have, the less likely you are to have, let's say, those codependency tendencies, right?
Yeah.
Not that one person, that other one flawed, beloved human being doesn't define all of you.
Yeah.
That's a really important part for an individual's work. And then theoretically, both of you have really strong rooting systems.
Yeah.
And then you guys just get to enjoy walking down life together.
That's good.
Right.
Kind of witnessing each other's joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way that they ensue their passions,
Yeah,
the
that's
way
good.
that they engage on a topic that they're really into, and that's how I get to know you.
Here's the beautiful thing. When I start to understand my adaptive strategies coming into the relationship, because my early childhood experiences, again, created ways of relating, my attachment styles, my personality, my experiences, all of it, right? It's just this really, very complex storyline. I bring that into a relationship. When I start to understand that more, when I start to really get connected with what it is that I've experienced and how that is like impacting my current relationships, when I start to look at what codependency is, that's when I'm enmeshed. It's like, I don't know where I end and someone else begins. My boundaries are kind of funky and I don't even know what boundaries are. When I start to implement healthy things like boundaries, I start to implement healthy things like emotional regulation of my own self, internal boundaries. When I start to realize that I'm worthy of love and connection, and I'm worthy of love and belonging, and with that is, an understanding of respect and dignity. And when I start to understand that I do have a purpose and I have an identity and I have my own gifts and talents, and I can start to walk in my own my own lane, I can stand in my own hula hoop. I can be independent as well as interdependent in a healthy relationship. When I start to do all of those things, what happens is that the relationship generally does get better to a degree, because the person who's choosing to do the work, one of them and or both of them, then you start to see healthy patterns occur.
So the question is what do you do when you find two partners are kind of at a standoff about how, let's say he feels about a certain boundary that's been set, and she feels like a boundary's been set, and they're trying to come to terms with it. So I just had a client one time, her partner's in recovery and goes to AA meetings, but he also has a history of inappropriateness with other women.
Yeah.
And so he started doing some volunteer work with a woman, and she was saying, I am not comfortable with this.
Yeah.
I don't like this.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I want you to go to a different meeting. I don't want you at that meeting anymore.
Yeah.
And the problem starts with, instead of him hearing, right? We say the important thing about communication is that you listen to understand, not to respond.
Yeah.
And here, my wife's feeling unsafe because of our history and my history. How do I help her feel safe while also getting my needs met, right?
Yeah.
He skipped over all of that
Right.
and just went, no, this is my home meeting. You're being too extreme, too absurd. I'm not changing my meeting, deal with it. That's where the problem comes from, that part, right?
Yeah.
But let's even say if he had this exceptional response and said, I'm really sorry that my poor choices and my poor boundaries have led you to feel unsafe with me being at this AA meeting with this particular woman here. Is there something I can do to help you feel safe while also validating the fact that this meeting is very important for my recovery? I have a lot of great guys that I meet with here. This is meaningful to me. Can we negotiate this, right? The goal ultimately is, you're feeling unsafe with something that I'm doing. You've asked me to set a boundary. It doesn't sound reasonable to me. Can we negotiate me getting my needs met here while still helping you feel safe?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what has to happen.
You bet.
Post-infidelity,
Yeah,
post-betrayal,
Yep.
is you navigate these fine lines between, I don't like this, I don't feel safe. And I'll be honest, and I'm sure you can validate this. It's all in betraying, the lying, the deceiving partner's response.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
If they were just honest and saying, oh man, I could understand why you would not feel safe with this person.
Well, empathy is a huge deal in that process. And empathy grows as a person becomes healthier.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
Well, and I think that, what you're talking about is, in sort of neurobiological terms, it's like that whole prefrontal cortex. That's like that executive functioning.
Slow it down.
Doesn't always compute, right? So they're responding from the part that's,
how dare you? How many more years do we have to go through
emotional.
this? It's been at least 6 months since I've told a lie. When will you trust me again? Sorry. It's not funny because these are people's lives.
No, it's not funny, but it's the
we hear it so
reality.
often
Yes.
that it's like we could write it up on a board. Yeah. I mean, I know one of my biggest things that I work on and blow every single day is something I preach every day, which is, imagine how different we would view our loved ones, or just even people we cross paths with on a daily basis, if I just viewed you as someone who's just seeking safety. You just want to feel safe and heard and seen.
Yeah.
So if my husband, let's say, has a super stressful day and he comes in and he's just like, the house is messy and everything. What if I just viewed his behavior as like, wow, he must be feeling really unsafe. Like he just must, and I don't know, sometimes that word doesn't work for you. It might just, dysregulated. Like things aren't the way he hoped it would be. Like things are uncertain and he doesn't, right? These are all yucky words to our nervous system. We don't like unsafety. We don't like uncertainty. We like consistency, predictability, the same old thing. And anything outside of that, our body goes a little haywire. And if only I had that prefrontal skill to see everyone from that place. And then I go, okay, this is negotiable then. You're not feeling comfortable. You're not feeling stable. Let's now negotiate. What do you need? What would help you feel safer? What's within, okay, I'm dealing with the kids right now, so I don't have time to clean the kitchen. Is there something else that you can do to help you feel better? Right? I mean, those discussions would be,
it'd be changing.
Therapists, couples therapists would be out of a job.
Exactly.
Honestly, because we just don't have the time to slow it down. Our monkey brain sees someone else dysregulated, then we get dysregulated because it's like, how dare he talk about my dirty kitchen? Doesn't he know what I do every day? Right? And we take it and make it about ourselves. We see it through a shame lens. We see it through like a how dare you, righteous indignation lens.
That's right.
I mean, how quickly would these problems be fixed if we could see it from that lens?
It'd be huge.
Marriage Health with James and Teri Kraft. If you feel like you need someone to come alongside you, a coach or a counselor, reach out to us The link is in the description.